The Fastest Cat in the West by Davies. Chapter 1. Ironwood Pass. Jace Hawkins was a big man, a warrior, forged in the fires of war and forgotten gunfights. His face was weathered by the sun and chiseled by a lifetime of oak, barreled booze, loose women, and hard living. The wind moaned low over the rocks of Ironwood Pass, a sound as old and tired as the bones of the earth itself. Jace Hawkins reined in his Mustang and tipped back the brim of his old cavalry hat. Piercing blue eyes, sharp as fresh forged steel, scanned the narrow trail ahead. A tingle ran up his spine. The sounds of nature around him became silent, like the closing of a door. Something was off. His thumb unfastened the tie-down on the hammer of his Colt, and his fingers twitched near the worn handle. It had been months since his last face-to-face gunfight, longer still since he'd drawn first. But instincts honed over a lifetime in the West didn't just fade with good intentions or an empty stomach. The echo of a boot scraped stone. Then came 5 shadows, bounty hunters, rifles drawn, grins dripping venom. They each wore the tattered gray remnants of Confederate Army uniforms. "Well, howdy me," drawled the leader, a scruffy man with crooked teeth and a weathered Winchester. "If it ain't the Gravedigger, Jace Hawkins himself, the Yankee hero of Vicksburg and now worth $2,000 of Texas reward money. Guess your luck just ran out, Bluebelly." Jace said nothing. The Texas reward was for a fair fight in a crooked town. Besides, Texas bounties didn't hold up in Arizona territory, but he didn't think they'd appreciate a lesson on the law at that moment. He shifted his weight slightly in the saddle, not for the gun, but to angle his boot toward his horse's reins. Sometimes you just had to try your luck. He'd nearly gone for it when it happened. A wild screech cut through the canyon air. A blur of calico and claws launched from the rocks above and landed square on the outlaw leader's face. A scream and chaos followed. The men shouted and stumbled. The cat, a scraggly, furious thing, clawed and hissed like a demon out of a campfire story. In the confusion, Jace rolled from his saddle and behind a boulder, gun out. 4 shots, fast and clean. The last man fled down the trail, yelping. When the dust settled, Jace stepped into the clearing. The wannabe headhunters lay motionless. The cat sat nearby on a flat rock, licking its paw. Jace looked from the bodies to the feline. "I reckon I owe you one," he muttered. Chapter 2. A new kind of partner. They made camp beneath a twisted mesquite tree 3 miles from the pass. Jace built a fire and brewed a pot of chicory root coffee. The cat circled him once, then settled near his boots, her tail flicking slowly. "Guess I need to call you something," Jace said aloud. "Cleo, after a cantankerous old aunt I once had." The cat blinked at him, unimpressed. "Okay, maybe Cleo, after Cleopatra, the old-timey queen of Egypt." Cleo nudged his foot in acceptance. He got a small tote out of his saddlebag and cut a strip of jerky. He laid half of it gently on a flat stone. Cleo sniffed it, then accepted the offering with a small, grudging purr. The fire crackled and the sky spilled over in a blanket of stars. He sipped his coffee. For the first time in years, Jace took off his gun belt and left it beside his saddle. He stared at the weapon for a long time, and he thought of the many times it earned him the nickname Gravedigger. Maybe it was the cat, maybe it was something else, but by morning when the sun painted the land in gold, he'd made a choice. He packed the 6-gun into the bottom of his saddlebag, pulled out a map, and rode north toward the settler lands near Garland Falls. But first, Jace thought he'd round up a wagon and some livestock to trade along the way. Chapter 3. Garland Falls and the First Sale. Garland Falls was what passed as civilization in the Old West: a bank, a saloon, a hotel, a blacksmith livery, and a jumbled assortment of merchants. The falls even had a schoolhouse and a steepled church. Cats? The general store owner squinted across the counter at Jace in disgust. What in Sam Hill would I want with cats? Jace gestured toward the wagon behind him. 8 furry passengers blinked in the sunlight, some curious, some napping. Cleo had helped him locate the elusive merchandise. "They'll keep your grain and dry goods safe," Jace said. "Rats hate 'em. So do snakes." $10 for a cat, the shopkeeper grunted. Sounds like a scam and a darn waste of good money. At that moment, a gray blur darted into the store, followed by a high-pitched squeak. One of the cats pounced. A moment later, it emerged from behind a barrel with a fat rat dangling from its jaws. The shopkeeper stared. "I'll take 4, the man said eagerly. Jace tipped his hat. Chapter 4. Whiskers and War Paint. The painted hills glowed red in the midday sun, their ridges cutting sharp across the horizon like an artist's sweeping brushstrokes. Jace pulled the wagon to a slow halt when he saw the line of riders cresting the ridge to the east. Apache, a dozen strong, their ponies alert, the braves' faces streaked in war paint and their expressions unreadable. He didn't move to reach for the rifle sitting beneath his seat. Instead, he raised his hands and stepped down from the wagon and stood quiet beside Cleo, who perched coolly on the ground with her tail wrapped around her paws. He moved slowly, and from the back of the wagon, he gently lifted a cat, large, sleek, with black and white markings that rippled in ever-changing design. Its eyes were steady, its shoulders taut like a mountain cat's. He walked forward with the cat. The chief cautiously dismounted first and drove a feathered-adorned lance into the ground. They met in the middle of the dusty trail, the air tense but not hostile. Jace didn't speak at first. He simply extended the animal. "Cats are like my children, and I find them homes where they are destined to thrive and bring joy." "He's a hunter. Strong. Proud," Jace said. "I figure he's meant to be with a leader and someone who walks the land like he does." The chief took the cat with both hands. It blinked at him slowly, no fear in its bones. It began to purr and nestled its head against the chief's neck, affectionately. A small murmur moved through the assembled riders. "He bears the marks of the Great Spirit," the chief said in low, steady tones, almost in worship. He held the cat more tightly. "A living gift is a gift of great power. Take this." The chief bowed his head and removed a turquoise stone on a beaded necklace from around his own neck and placed it on Jace. Then, with great ceremony, he said, "You now ride safely as a friend in Apache land, father of cats." And with that, the path opened before him, and the west widened once more. Chapter 5. Pittsfield Lockup. Pittsfield was the kind of town where the tumbleweeds came to die, and the law wore more belly than badge. Marshal Clayton Wormwood stood on the boardwalk outside the town hall, crimson-faced and inflating with every paw print Jace's cats left in the dusty street. "Vermin! Infestation!" he shouted, pointing an accusing finger at the wagon as it rolled in. "This is an epidemic of the most vile kind." Before Jace could dismount, he was hauled off the wagon and slapped in irons. "1 week in jail for every dirty flea-infested cat," Wormwood wheezed, "and a bullet to the head for each of these pests," he sneezed, "starting with that smug, shifty-colored devil you had beside you." The marshal clumsily pulled his gun, but before he could act, Cleo gave a hiss, and her clouder of cats jumped from the wagon and disappeared beneath the town's boardwalk. The marshal spun in dazed confusion. Cleo herself hid around the corner of the jail and blinked slowly as if she could already see the jailbreak plans flashing through her shrewd and inscrutable mind. That night, the cats moved like smoke. One pawed the jail door open, another fished keys from atop the desk. Cleo herself slithered between bars and perched on the marshal's sleeping chest, just long enough to trigger a mighty sneeze that echoed through 3 counties. By sunrise, Jace was gone, and so were the cats, leaving only a runny-nosed, blotch-covered marshal, a trail of paw prints, and one mildly trampled huckleberry patch. Chapter 6. Primrose Valley. From the top of his creaking wagon full of cats, Jace looked ahead. The valley appeared like a forgotten dream, green and rolling, touched by water and guarded by golden hills. Primrose lived up to its name, until recently. The valley was on the decline. Raiders terrorized the farmers and burned crops in the field. Jace arrived as barns sagged, children coughed from smoke, and soot-streaked farmers cradled squirrel rifles just to feel like they could do something. Evil had walked into the valley before Jace and tried to drive the farmers out. But word of the cat trader spread fast. Something new. Hope, comfort. In a matter of days, grain that once vanished overnight was safe. Sacks remained intact. Snakes went scarce. And among the wheat fields and rising fences stood red-haired Lily Fowler, the 20-something orphaned daughter of a fair to middling farmer. As her neighbors lined up to pet and cuddle Jace's wares, she watched as he unloaded a crate of sleepy kittens. Her pretty face was marred by a crooked brow and a suspicious scowl. She rested her right hand on her hip near a holstered old black powder pistol. "Never seen a man trade in cats before," she said. "Mighty strange. Most men around here make their living from farming or taking what other people have earned." "I do neither. I used to think the things a man needs came from a six-shooter," he replied. "Turns out it purrs." She thought that over for a moment. Her face brightened like a dawning day. "I do love cats." He smiled in reply. "I'm Jace Hawkins, by the way, but most people just call me Jace." "Well, I'm glad to make your acquaintance. Jace, my name is Lily Fowler, and most people call me Miss Fowler." She hesitated for a moment. "But you can call me Lily." "Lily," he said softly. "I think I once saw a flower they named after you." She laughed then, clean and sharp, and invited him in for rabbit stew. Later, as darkness draped the windows of Lily's small ranch house, tallow candles lit the table where they ate. "Never had a meal this fine or filling," Jace said, as he mopped up the last of his stew with a flaky sourdough biscuit. "You never been many places then, I think," she teased. Jace laughed. "Rode a fair bit, but the places I've been, the only things they cook up is trouble." "Well, Jace," she frowned, "if it's trouble you're looking for, you've come to the right place." "I noticed some of the farms burned when I rode in," he said. "Land grabbers, I reckon." Lily nodded. "Yes, that's a fact. Easterner named Branch Maddox moved in about a year ago and decided to make Primrose Valley part of his cattle empire. Those who won't sell get murdered and burned out. I guess you'll be moving on after you sell your cats." He hesitated for a moment. "I may stick around a while." "If you want, you can park your wagon next to the house, and you and your cats can sleep in the barn," she invited. "Thank you, Lily. You're most gracious." He also thought she was beautiful, but didn't say it aloud. Chapter 7. Ashes and Warnings. They came at midnight. Jace woke to the scent of smoke and the desperate yowls of cats. He stumbled from the hayloft above the barn, boots half on, heart in his throat. The flames danced like devils across Lily's eastern field. Her barn, a proud, tall thing built by her late father's calloused hands, was ablaze. The sky turned copper and blood orange, and the air pulsed with heat. Jace sprinted through the courtyard, unlatched holding pen doors, and hauled water by the bucket until his arms screamed. Cleo emerged from the smoke, dragging a limp kitten by the scruff. Her fur was singed, her eyes wild. Lily stumbled beside him, coughing, cradling another soot-streaked cat. "They locked the animals in," she rasped. "This wasn't a random fire." She didn't have to say it aloud. Maddox, the cattleman who wanted the valley for his own. They found the message scrawled on a charred post with an old branding iron. "Run." Chapter 8. Smoke and Steel. Dawn came gray and slow, as if ashamed. Jace stood near what used to be Lily's barn, her hand wrapped tightly around his. Cleo slept curled on a scorched saddle blanket, one paw twitching with the memory of the flames. "I said I was done with guns," Jace whispered. Lily's voice was hard. "And you said you weren't that man anymore." He looked at her. "I'm not," he said, "but I guess I've got to be. Till this is over." She didn't argue. Later, from a storage bin beneath his wagon, Jace unwrapped an oilskin bundle. Inside, his revolver, polished, loaded, ready. He strapped it on. It felt heavier than he remembered. It didn't have notches, but it still carried the lives and memories of many dead men. Chapter 9. The Rally at Primrose Valley. That afternoon, Jace stood at the center of the livery's corral. Farmers gathered around, rifles in hand. Children peeked over fence rails. Cats clustered on windowsills and wagon beds, sensing something had changed. "This valley is yours," Jace said. "Maddox thinks fear will scatter you." He scanned the crowd. "But he doesn't know we've got claws." A cheer rose, not loud, but strong. One farmer, a wiry man with sunburned cheeks, raised his scattergun. "What's the plan?" Jace pointed to Cleo, who now stood tail high. "We're going to catch some rats, and we set the trap at dawn." Chapter 10. High noon, low mercy. The sun beat down hard and hot. By the time the clock on Primrose Valley City Hall hit noon, the streets were stripped bare of all but courage. Jace stood at the center of the main drag, boots planted, jacket billowing slightly. At his feet and on the awnings above, cats waited, silent, watchful. Maddox arrived with a smirk and 5 hard-eyed gunslicks at his back. Horses pawed the dirt. Guns gleamed. The town held its breath. "Thought you'd be half gone from the territory by now," Maddox called. "Didn't figure a cat lover for any guts." "I used to run when necessary," Jace said, "and I used to shoot when necessary. Got pretty good at it, too." Just then, one of Maddox's riders leaned over and whispered into his boss's ear. Jace could just make out but one word: Gravedigger. Maddox's eyes widened, then he shook his head. "I don't care who you are, you're still just one man." "That's not true, Maddox. Look around," Jace pointed. From the shop doorways and second-floor windows, the barrels of a dozen rifles pointed at Maddox and his men. Even Lily Fowler, rifle in hand, stood on the boardwalk to Jace's left. Cleo was perched on the saloon rooftop with her ears pinned back. "They ain't scared of you, Maddox," Jace said. Maddox sneered. "That's all you got, cowards, women, and cats." A single meow split the silence. Then all hell yowled loose. Cats dropped like thunderclouds from balconies and rooftops. Maddox's men's horses went wild as a hail of farmers' bullets kicked up the dirt at their feet. The gunmen panicked and fired wildly, swatting at fur and claws. Cleo tackled one from behind, landing them both in a watering trough. Jace's revolver barked twice, clean and fast. 2 gunmen down. 1 horse bolted. 1 gunman suddenly found religion after Lily parted his hair with a Winchester bullet. The wild-eyed man rode out of town faster than the Pony Express. Maddox pulled his own iron, but a streak of orange striped fury named Sunshine latched onto his wrist mid-draw. The bullet went wide, embedding in a sign that read, "Welcome to Primrose Valley." Jace stepped forward, leveled his Colt, and fired once. Maddox dropped to his knees, head grazed and gasping. You lost, Jace said, lowering the barrel. Now ride out before Cleo gets mad. You wouldn't like her when she gets mad. Chapter 11. A Wedding and a Whisper. Primrose Valley threw a celebration with fiddles, jug bands, and stomping feet. The fracas was big enough to rattle the hills. Lily wore a simple cotton dress with sunflowers in her hair. Jace wore his oldest boots, polished to a dull shine, and a grin that hadn't seen daylight in years. They were married beneath the cottonwoods with cats circling their feet and kids tossing flower petals that mostly got batted out of the air by enthusiastic paws. Cleo, draped in a garland of clover and beads, dragged the rings on a velvet pillow with a feline grace befitting frontier royalty. Afterward, Jace handed his revolver to Lily and asked her to give the gun a proper burial, in honor of the forgotten bad men who met its justice. She nodded and took the gun. Figured we ought to keep moving forward, he said. We got cats to sell. Lily took his arm. Cleo leapt into the wagon seat and let out a single approving meow. Epilogue. The Wagon Full of Whiskers. Years later, folks say you can still spot that wagon rolling slow across the plains, creaking under the weight of a dozen purring passengers, driven by a man in a Civil War slouch blue hat with a calico cat perched majestically on his shoulder. At his side rode a red-haired angel, a woman full of pride and Western beauty. Kids press their noses to windows and whisper, "Is that him?" Old-timers just smile. That's Jace Hawkins, they say. Used to be the fastest gun in the West. Then he got saved by something faster. And the cat? Well now, they chuckle, that's the real hero of the story. The end.